Well, good morning. Thank you for joining us on WXOX 97.1 FM in Louisville, Kentucky. And this is Artist Talk with LVA, the show produced by Louisville Visual Art. And I'm your host, Keith Waits. The 12th annual Flyover Film Festival kicks off at the Speed Cinema July 28th, and it runs through the July 31st. That is the day of this broadcast. And it is presented by the Louisville Film Society and the Speed Cinema. This year's lineup includes narrative and documentary features, as well as a shorts program and filmmaker panels. Each of the screenings will be followed by discussions with the filmmakers. So with us today to talk about the Flyover Film Festival, Stu Pollard, who Louisville native, is an American film producer, writer, and director. His credits include Nice Guys Sleep Alone and Keep Your Distance, with his production company, Lunacy Productions. Lunacy, I think I slurred that a little bit. Lunacy Productions. Pollard produced the critically acclaimed survival thriller Rust Creek, which won the Best Thriller Feature Award at the San Diego International Film Festival, and in November 2020 started broadcasting on Netflix, which is where I saw it in my pandemic lockup. The film spent more than a week on Netflix's top 10 movies list. His latest release is the romantic comedy Plus One, starring Jack Quaid and Maya Erskine. Also with us, Mellissa Gregory writes, directs, and produces films and series that examine neglected social issues to inspire compassionate action on our planet. Her work has been shown on PBS, Roku, Amazon, and in film festivals around the world. In her latest documentary, Live Out Loud, Mellissa had the great privilege to work with the world-renowned musicians of the Gallup Quintet. Before shifting her focus to film, Mellissa taught writing and literature at Portland Community College in Portland, Oregon for many years. In 2020, she moved back to her home state, Kentucky, in order to be closer to family. Mellissa grew up on a cattle and tobacco farm in Bourbon County long before smoking was out and bourbon was cool. As a person with chronic Lyme and autoimmune disease, she is eager to get started on documentaries that address inequities for people with both visible and invisible disabilities. And finally, Richard Van Cleek is a producer director with credits including long-form films like Tempest Rising, featuring the Louisville Ballet, Dancing with Clara, and Taste the String. Short films from Richard include The Veil, Convergence Redux with Julius Friedman, old friend of all of us, and Prokofiev on the Ohio, Cinderella's Dream, and which is featured in this festival this year, is the film Pulling Water. And Richard has a long resume, but I do want to mention, we were just talking before we started recording, that he also was the producer of the award-winning PBS music series, The Lonesome Pine Specials, co-produced with KET, which are now in the permanent collection of the Smithsonian Institute's Museum of American History and the American Archive of Public Broadcasting at the Library of Congress. You know, I think that's really cool, because if that's all you ever did, Richard, I think that's a pretty good legacy. But anyway, so let's get into talking about this. Stu, let's start with you. Give us a little like the thumbnail description of the Flyover Festival and the history of the festival. 12 years. This is a pretty good run. This is a pretty solid event happening in Louisville now. It's not going
anywhere. Yeah, thanks for having us, and thanks so much to Mellissa and Richard, and to you for joining us on the show. So all of us have pretty deep ties to the Louisville community, and I've been involved with the Film Society since it started back in 2009. And part of the reason I got involved with it was because I wanted a film festival in Louisville. And so when we started the Film Society in 2009, I'm one of the original board members. The whole idea was to do something that helped the filmmakers in the community, and sort of try to build a bridge between people who were fans of film in the community and also the filmmakers in the community. So a few years later, we launched the festival, and we're saying this is our 12th annual festival. We did take a little bit of time off for the pandemic, as everyone did. But it's always been a festival that's tried to weave some degree of Louisville and Kentucky into its programming. And obviously, as the incentives have kind of come and gone in the state, that's been easier to do some years than others. So we're happy to be back, and happy to have a very Kentucky-centric program this year. And in the case of Melissa's film, it's a Kentucky filmmaker. In the case of Richard's film, it's a Kentucky filmmaker, and a lot of Kentucky in the film. So I'll let them dominate most of this conversation, as they should. Their films screen on Sunday, the 31st. And obviously they'll both be there to talk about their films. And then Richard's in particular is our final film of the weekend, and he'll tell you in particular about how a lot of the people in his film in particular will be there after the film to talk about it. Mellissa will tell you that her film actually was filmed in Portland, so her subjects won't necessarily be there, but a fascinating film about filmmaking, actually. So anyway, really looking forward actually to this conversation, because they'll give us a sneak preview. They'll also be participating, I should mention, in a panel about documentary filmmaking. So this conversation will sort of be a sneak preview of that on Sunday morning, 11 a.m. And we'll have a panel on narrative filmmaking on Saturday at 11 a.m. So I think we're really here to hear more about Richard and Melissa's story. So I'll be quiet most of this conversation and chime in when necessary, but you can get tickets to the festival at our website, which is LouisvilleFilmSociety.org, and also the Speed's website, which is speedmuseum.org. So please come check it out if you're so inclined. We'd love to see you there.
Well, thanks, Stu. And I do want to talk to Mellissa and Richard, but I also think it's important to sort of give people a sense of what else is happening in the festival. So Sunday is the big day for the people we're talking to today, and a busy day. You're gonna have a long day that day.
Yeah. And I should mention Morgan Atkinson, who's another documentary filmmaker in our community who's done a lot of great work over the years. He's got a film called Statues that's screening in between Melissa's and Richard's. So would have had him join us as well, but we wanted to keep it limited to two filmmakers today. So he's produced a wonderful film, and hopefully if you're a documentary filmmaker fan, Sunday is your day at the festival. So it'll be a wonderful day to join us.
Well, I saw that title on the schedule. I did not realize it was Morgan. Does that mean that the film will be covering some of the issues with public art that has occurred in Louisville, Kentucky?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
And of course, by which I mean the Castleman statue. So
yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, it is not a metaphorical title.
Okay.
So.
Well, that's good. I think that's a great subject. I mean, we all watched it with fascination, and I'd be curious to see what he does, because I remember my own observation at the time was that everybody was very interested in what politicians and municipal figures wanted had to say about it, but there was very little interest in what artists who do that kind of work thought about it.
Yeah.
And I did a little piece about it, but I thought that was the missing voice in all that discussion, not necessarily whoever did the Castleman statue, because they're out of the picture, but what does somebody like Ed Hamilton think about it? What does somebody like Matt Weir think about it? How do they view this changing landscape for public art? So I'm very fascinated to do that. But again, Morgan is not here, and Mellissa and Richard are. Mellissa, let's start with you. Living Out Loud is the name of your film. And so tell us what it's about. Tell us what you're doing here.
Okay, first of all, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to meet you. And yeah, the title is Live Out Loud, and it's a feature documentary about 3 people who are unhoused, and they become part of a grant based filmmaking program, and they learn to make films with artists in residence. Over the course of the year, they're really changed greatly and empowered, and they start to begin to heal from childhood trauma. So the common denominator for all 3 of them was, despite completely different socioeconomic backgrounds and coming from different parts of the country, they all grew up dealing with childhood trauma. And so that's how they ended up living on the streets.
Now, how did you find these people for them to be your subject?
Well, I was very fortunate because I knew one of the artists in residence. Well, actually, I knew a couple of them who got the grant to do the program. And so immediately when I heard about it, I just thought that is a fantastic idea. I was so intrigued. I wanted to see how it was going to impact these folks. And my hypothesis was really, this is going to have an incredible life-changing impact, because for me, I know as a filmmaker, learning to make films really helped me gain a lot of self-esteem. And so that was my hypothesis going in. And luckily it worked out. So at the end of the year, they were all in different ways and they were in much better stages in their lives. And I think learning to direct films really helped them learn to direct their own lives.
That's interesting. I also think too, I don't know about generations now, but making a film always seemed like an impossible task. We think about lots of money in Hollywood and all this kind of thing. And so to be introduced to the idea that making a film can be something within the grasp of almost anybody. I mean, there is a need for some equipment and things like that, but that it doesn't have to be that kind of cliched big budget sort of experience. So how long did you spend with them?
1 year. So they started in the summer of 2002, I think it was, to 2003. And one of them stayed with the next group of artists and residents who came in, and he kept making films, and the other two went on to different things. But going back to what you just said, I think the other thing that it really shows is that we have a tremendous amount of wasted human potential on our streets. And that's what people tend to overlook about the homelessness issue, is these are people who, some of whom are geniuses, literally. There are people who used to work on Wall Street who are living on the streets. There are people who used to be therapists who are living on the streets. So there is a lot of talent that is untapped, and a lot of human potential going to waste in our country.
Well, I think that is still, and people will say that over and over again, but I still think that the sort of easy knee-jerk reaction to homeless people is that they're there because they do not have skills, motivate, it's almost as if they deserve to be there, which is a horrible sort of attitude. And nobody ever really stops to think that there but for the grace, right, of God go I. So yes, it is a situation that is much closer to, people are much closer to homelessness than they ever really want to imagine.
Exactly. Yeah.
But I was going to ask you if any of them kept up with the filmmaking. I think that's an interesting idea, to how many will go forward and have that as a part of their lives, and perhaps even turn it into some sort of career opportunity, I guess.
Well, without giving too much away, I will say they are all three still writing, but they're different places with, one is a much more advanced kind of stage of writing than the other two, but they are still writing.
Cool. Are they writing are they writing something like a film script, or are they writing more like prose or narrative?
Well, two of them are writing scripts. One of them, again, I don't want to give too much.
Yeah, right. And I don't want to,
and then one is she's journaling. Sumaya keeps a journal, and that's a very, if you've ever kept a journal or taught, I used to teach writing. Writing can be very therapeutic. So for people who've experienced a lot of trauma, that is a way to work through that.
Now, has Live Out Loud screened at other festivals? What's its history of a public presentation?
Yeah, we had our world premiere at Dances with Films in Hollywood at the TCL Chinese Theaters a few weeks ago. And it was incredible because actually Sumaya, who's right here, she is now, and I found this out the day before I found out we were having our premiere there. I've been trying to find her for the whole pandemic. I've been looking for her and not getting a response. And she texted me out of the blue and said, I'm in Venice Beach. It's just a newspaper article published about me. And she wanted me to read the article. And then the next day I got the call that we were premiering at Dances with Films. And I said, you're not going to believe this, but we're having our premiere in your backyard. So she was at the premiere with me, and she brought, about 5 friends she's in public housing in Venice Beach, and she's gotten really excellent health care there. And so lots of things have changed for her. She's doing better than she has in 30 years.
Great.
Yeah.
Terrific.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to make Richard wait any longer. So Richard.
No problem. I'm enjoying the conversation.
Well, that's good to know. It is, but I don't want to be, I want to give you your time here. Talk about your piece here, the gurgle pulling of water that is featured in the festival. Tell us about that.
Well, this was a movie. It was interesting to hear Mellissa say that she knew who her three subjects were ahead of time when she went into filming. This was, if it's understood that correctly. For me, it was just the opposite. I knew I was interested in rowing as a subject, but I didn't really know if there was a film there and how many people, amazing people, I was going to meet. And that developed over the course of filming for 6 months. And I met amazing people. I had no idea. Here they were living in Louisville. I didn't know their stories. So it basically the movie uses rowing as a platform, but really covers subjects, everything from democracy to the danger of rowing to adaptive achievements by there's 15 chapters in this movie, and one of them is about Louisville has one of the largest and best adaptive rowing programs in the country, which is allowing people that might not have ever imagined that they could get in this little skinny boat and go out and row on their own and do something that independent and exciting. The age ranges in this movie, I mean, for instance, just a little tease, one of the life lessons that is demonstrated in the film revolves around a ham sandwich, and I won't say anything more than that, but I'm still overwhelmed and honored that that these people shared their stories, because I really embedded with them for the whole summer. And I think there's so many interesting things for people to get out of watching this movie about human achievement, about just a lifelong passion. The age range goes from a 16-year-old to a very active 88-year-old rower who drives around Louisville on a Vespa. Maybe you've seen him sometime, Peter Salerno. It was just one character after another. And getting back to the movie, and so I had to discover whether it had enough people. I kept saying, do I have a film here or not? And it was after my first interview with John Hale that at the end of that interview, he's a celebrated archaeologist, runs the liberal arts school at University of Louisville. He's an author, and I didn't know about him before this, and a historian on ancient rowing in the Mediterranean. And at the end of the interview, I just kind of smiled to myself, said, I think I've got a movie here. Knowing that he could be kind of Greek chorus through line along with Tori Murden McClure, who I also did not know about. I knew a woman had rowed solo across the Atlantic, but I didn't know she was in Louisville because I had been away up at Northwestern for 13 years and sort of got out of touch with what was going on down here. And so for me, it was, all documentary filmmaking it's an act of faith. You just hope that enough content is going to be there and enough stories that you really have something that can have an arc and will do something to support and champion the subject, but also be interesting for people to watch.
Well, you're talking about what I think is maybe the essential difference between documentary and, we'll say non-documentary filmmaking, narrative filmmaking, is that you don't know what your film is. And when you start, I would think that's probably a common experience for documentarians. You have some ideas about what you're after, but along the way, there must be a really powerful sense of discovery as you meet and talk to these different people, and because they end up influencing and shaping your film in ways that might not be the case for a fictional narrative film. So have you ever started a process with a subject and then realized, I'm not going to find a film here?
I can't say that I recall one of those yet. I there are probably a couple back in the day that never saw the light of day. Let's put it that way, because in the end, when you look at it, just say, and why am I interested in this? You just don't feel like there wasn't enough depth of story there to really drive the movie. And for me, I make films about people and subjects that I just want to support. It's, when I'm not doing this, I'm working with a former Hollywood actor, Ryan Devlin, who lives in the area, and his wife, Cara, is a very successful screenwriter. Well, they moved back to Louisville to be with her parents, and he's now running the Thrive School out at the Creasy Mahan Nature Preserve. And we've done a lot of films together supporting that. It's a outdoor preschool that 365 a year, no matter what the weather is, you're outside. The classroom is outside, and it's a wonderful thing. So that's the example of the other kind of things I do.
300. Well, there's a whole. I'd like to ask a lot of questions about that experience, but that's a whole nother show.
Yeah, we're getting off the subject. I apologize.
Well, Mellissa, I want to come back to you with that same idea. Like, when you start a project, when you have an idea to tell a certain story or explore a certain topic, have you ever had a frustration in worrying about whether or not it's going to come together?
Well, I mean, with this one, because I was with them for so long, any one of them could have hit the road at any point and I might have never seen them again. So I just had so much good fortune. I mean, and actually, Richard, I did not know they were going to be my subjects. I just walked into the first day. Yeah, I walked in on the first day of class, introduced myself, explained what my motivation was, and tried to convince everyone that I wasn't there to harass them. You know, it's very difficult to have somebody with a camera on you all the time. It takes a lot of, I think just the fact that they were willing to allow me to capture their process of becoming first-time filmmakers was an amazing thing in itself. And believe me, they got annoyed with me at points. So there were many things that I was fortunate in. One was that they believed me, they trusted me, and then that they stuck with the program. And this, I think that it was just, they didn't want to be anywhere else. I mean, imagine like every Saturday, you're living on the streets, and every Saturday you get to come to a place where people treat you like an equal artist, and they make you feel validated for your mental ability and your artistic, your creative talents. So they just absolutely were thrilled to be there every Saturday. And they were, yeah, it was. And so we're really hoping that as far as social impact part of the film, that we can help inspire other cities to create similar types of programs. So we're not just addressing food, water, shelter, basic needs, but we also have to help people overcome being trampled down again and again and again. And that's what happens to people's self-esteem living on the streets. So you got to repair people's insides too, so that they can move forward.
Well, and it sounds like there was a great need for them to trust you. And usually that is only something that comes over through the course of time. But because they were also in the position of being filmmakers, do you think that made it much easier for them to trust you?
I think that definitely helped, because there was a collaborative nature, even though they weren't, I would have loved to make the film in a way where they were actually helping me make the film, but the meta there would be ridiculous. Like them helping me make a film about them making films, that would have gotten a little bit chaotic. So, it was necessary for me to be the one capturing their process. But there were definitely times where they were very interested in my equipment, and they were always asking me, show me how you do this. Wow, let me see that mic. That's a great, wireless. And so I was kind of showing them, if you keep going, this is the kind of equipment you'll be working with. So And then they ended up turning their cameras on me.
Well, that's what I wondered. Yeah, when
Yeah.
you talk about the meta aspect of it.
Yeah.
In your film, do we see any of their work?
Yes. Mhm.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. And there is a moment, one of my favorite moments is when Sumaya says, "Come be in the film with me." And it was such a wonderful, I just loved it because I went back in my mind, I flashed back to all my documentary film classes, and I took a whole course on ethics, and you talk a lot about how much do you get involved with the people, your participants, and how much do you not. And in that moment, I just realized, of course I'm going to come be in the film with you. What am I going to say? No, I'm going to stand back. It was obvious that that line had already just kind of disappeared. So it was challenging emotionally. It's a very difficult thing to go in and be a part of people's lives one day a week when you know that some of them are going back to sleep out on the street at night. And I think all the artists and residents really struggled with that too. So I have a lot of ideas about ways that people could do programs and have more support for that part.
Well, but it sounds like what you're talking about is the sort of the struggle between wanting to lay down your camera and do something on a personal level, but that really in the end, the film has the opportunity to perhaps have more impact than an individual action. Like that's your individual action as a filmmaker has more impact than perhaps your individual action as a human being in that instance, which are not disconnected.
Mm-hmm. And then also there's a level of the trust, going back to that,
Right.
To say, no, I'm over here and you're over there. To me, that felt like I would just be pointing out like, no, we're not equals. I'm the filmmaker, you're the participant, or people used to say subject, but now we say participant. But I did not want them to feel like they were any less important than I was in the whole dynamic.
Right, that they weren't being put under a microscope.
Exactly. Yes, exactly.
Well, and Richard, so I'm wondering about, I mean, does this resonate with you and your experiences? Like when you were doing pulling water, I mean, like, are you a rower? Let me put it that way. Are you a rower? Did you get out in the water and work with the people that in that way that were your subject, or did you keep a distance?
I once rode 40 years ago, but one of the sort of epiphany moments for me was after being around these rowers for 2 months, they invited me to go out for a row with them.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, that's nice. They're going to take me on a little joyride around the chute there down by the boathouse. But no, it was a full working session. It was a sweep boat that has 8 people and a coxswain, and each person has only one oar they're in charge of. And I remember getting in the boat, they're 62 feet long and 2 feet wide. And my first thing was, what the hell am I doing? And what the profound thing was realizing, and this is when my respect for rowing and rowers just zoomed to the moon, was that every motion you do with your hand, your feet, your legs, your oar affects everyone else in the boat. So everyone is so interdependent. I never felt quite that part of something where I was worried that anything I did, I mean, your hands are doing different things, the timing, the depth the oar goes in, when it goes in, is it going with everyone else? When are you pushing on your legs? And so ever since that moment, when I watch rowing now, I'm just in awe of the coordination, amount of time and selflessness and collaboration that it takes. And the movie, the title is Gurgle, and that's explained in the first 4 minutes of the movie, but the title actually comes from what this moment in rowing that happens maybe only 2 or 3 times in people's lives when they're rowing in a big sweet boat. And that's when everyone hits it and they fall into this groove, and everything is synchronous. All 8 people are synchronous, and the boat rises up a little bit, and there's a sound they describe as a gurgle that goes down the keel of the boat. And it's such a sacred moment. It happens so rarely they didn't ever talk about it until they get back to the dock, because they're afraid that the spell, this mystical thing that's happening will stop happening.
Wow. I'm sorry, that just stops me for a second to think about that. That does sound pretty amazing.
And I can guarantee you there was no gurgle when I was in the boat.
Well, maybe you need to keep going back out until you have your.
I literally at one point thought I'm going to die today. And when we got back to the dock, I couldn't get out of the boat. I literally had to roll myself out of the boat onto the dock and just lie there for 5 minutes before I could even stand up, because this row, we started at the boathouse, we rowed all the way up in the Ohio River against the current, past the water tower, and then came back. And it was, it's amazing. But I don't want to scare anyone off rowing. It's a beautiful sport. And as you see, when you watch the movie, you'll see there's so many tangential things that enrich your life, that discipline you have to learn, and people you meet, and how to interact with different situations. It's an amazing sport.
Well, Stu, I do want to come back and talk to you a little bit. So your as a filmmaker, your history seems to be more tied to fictional narrative films like Rust Creek and the keeping your distance and things like that. Have you done any documentary work?
I have. In fact, I'm up in Albany, New York right now, and I guess I can say this with a straight face. I was at a bar last night and I saw that a guy named John Valby is going to be playing, who I didn't even know was still around. He's an off-color kind of vaudevillian style piano player, and he played college campuses back when I was in college, which is 30-something years ago. But he plays off-color music, dirty lyrics, basically. And so he's kind of like a comedian, but he plays basically, if you think of like those like dirty limericks you may have heard as a kid, that's his act. So we made a film called Dirty Country that basically sort of got into a little bit of free speech, and we sort of featured artists that sort of lived on the fringe and got into it. I saw a short film at a festival years ago, and it was about this guy who played shows in his garage, and it was country songs that were like these toe tapping melodies, but they were all very filthy lyrics. And I thought it was hilarious. And it turned out the guy was actually a real artist, and he'd gotten signed to a record deal by this guy who repped a lot of comedians out of Las Vegas. And we ended up making that doc that was sort of centered on him. But we ended up exploring, there was another band called Doug Clark's Hot Nuts that again played a lot of college campuses, and they'd been around for years. And there was a rap artist named Blowfly that was sort of, he came out like when the Sugar Hill Gang and Grandmaster Flash were sort of blowing up rap, but those artists they didn't do profane lyrics. There's a lot of profanity in all music now. So it ended up becoming a full-length documentary, premiered at South by Southwest, and it was a really interesting study on free speech and the history of body material in music. And so that was sort of my first foray into documentary filmmaking. And I've played around a little bit. We actually have one in development about breast reduction surgery that we're raising money for right now. That's you hear a lot about breast enhancement surgery, but not about the opposite. And there's a lot of health issues that women face that are when you deal with basically being overly well endowed. And so I'm very much behind the scenes on that one. So it's a team of women that are making that film. And then we have another documentary that we started during the pandemic that's just about kids that it started as a story about kids that were getting their graduations taken away, and it's just sort of started following them. But I don't think we're going to be done with that movie for 10 years because it's sort of like that the filmmaker that made the 7-Up series.
Michael Apted.
Yes, years ago. The filmmakers that I'm behind on that project disagree with me a little bit. I think they sort of want to be done with that project, but I'm like, the story is just beginning. And so we're going to be with that one for a while because the stories the kids we're following are interesting, but the impact of what happened to them or what's happening to them and just how their lives were, all those things they were looking forward to, and how their lives are changing as a result of what's happened over the last few years, the impact on that, they don't even know yet. And so we'll see if that turns into anything, but they've been very open with their stories, sort of like what Richard and Mellissa have talked about. You've got to have willing participants and not let them get too annoyed about checking in with them and being open, telling with them telling their stories. And so anyway, so we'll see what happens. And but those, I'm fascinated by the art form. I've never directed a documentary, but I've tried to support documentary filmmakers my entire career, and we'll see if those two turn out to be anything. But it is I think Richard put it best. It's an act of faith when you start down the path of telling these stories, and we'll see if they turn out to be finished products. We'll see if it happens.
Okay, very good. Well, and so the festival now in its 12th year, the Flyover Festival. Of course, I think it's an interesting name for the festival. Instead of calling it the Louisville Film Festival, Flyover Film Festival is so much more evocative, it seems to me, of what must have been the initial challenge of having a festival in Louisville in the first place.
Yeah, we went back and forth. I can't tell you the full origin story on that. I know we went back and forth on naming it for quite a while, and because depending on how you look at it, you could say is that pejorative in a sense, but it kind of rolls off the tongue. We like that part of it. It's fun to say, and we're very proud of the fact that it's stuck around as long as it have, and we're hoping that the incentive is new as of this year. We have a new incentive as of 2022. There's a lot of filmmaking going on right now. There's several features shooting in our community right now.
And
there's a lot.
You're talking about the incentive
Production
program,
incentive.
Production incentives by the state, which took a hit a few years ago.
Yeah, so we had a pretty active one from like 15 to 18, and it went away a couple of years ago, and now it's back. And with the help of Mary Kay Poe, who's very involved with the Kentucky Film Office. She's got a film that she produced that actually screens Saturday night called What We Do Next. So there's a lot of there's several other films on our program. You can again find them all on the Louisville Film Society website, louisvillefilm.org, louisvillefilmsociety.org. But yes, we've got a very strong production incentive in place now statewide, and there's a lot of features shooting now. And we're hoping that where that will lead the festival a year from now is we'll have even more films to program, local films that have shot here. It creates more opportunities for local filmmakers, not just the people directing and producing these films, but it builds up our crew base. So people like myself, Richard, Mellissa, all the other filmmakers that are making films in town will have more people to make them with in terms of our local crew here. So because they're all going to get more experience. In fact, tomorrow, Susie Eastman's organization, 502 Film, is hosting a PA boot camp, a production assistant boot camp, to try to train a lot of the local people in town just how to be more supportive at entry level filmmaking, so that when a larger production comes to town, we've got more people who can get hired locally and get trained on how to work on films. So that's
so smart. Everybody just thinks it's money, but you also need people who know what they're doing.
Yeah.
To make your money, that's how you are more efficient and spend less money. In our last few minutes, so Stu just was talking about all these projects he's got going on. Mellissa and Richard, I know we're here to talk about the films that are showing in the festival, but I'd like each of you to tell me, what's your next thing? What's your next project? Are you already involved, or are you searching? Mellissa?
My next project is going to deal with women's health in America, and that's as much as I'm going to say about it. I will say that it won't only focus on reproductive health, but that will be a part of it. And I am very anxious to get started. And then also, I just wanted to mention what's the film we skipped of yours, Stu, that I love so much? Freeland, right?
Oh, Freeland. Yep.
Okay, so Freeland is an incredible film, and I hope everybody will go watch it. What platform?
Gosh, that was in theaters for a while now. I think that's on Prime.
Yeah.
You can go to my website, lunacyproductions.com, and that'll tell you all the places it's playing. Thank you, Mellissa.
Oh, sure. Yeah, it was shot in Northern California. And if you've never seen Northern California, I mean, the landscapes are gorgeous and the acting is really absolutely fantastic. It's a very, very impressive film.
Okay, great. And Richard, what's up next for you?
Well, I'm considering a couple artists. I won't even get any more specific than that to do a film around, but what I'm doing currently will sound strange to people, but two doves are built and decided to start a family in the window box outside my house. And I've shot about 50 hours of that right now. So just as a break from doing a long film, I'm doing a short film on this whole process from checking out the window box to laying eggs to the babies being born to capturing the first flight out of the nest. And it was fascinating to watch.
So, and that's just something you started doing. So you don't have like a money producer sponsor, it's just something
that's my interim project right now till I forge ahead. And I'm spending a lot of time working on, there's some very interesting things coming up for Gurgle Pulling Water. University of Denver is looking at screening it with a live orchestra playing the score. The original score by Sean Schaefer Hennessy, which I'm very excited about. And if you don't know about Sean Schaefer Hennessy, check him out. He's a wonderful composer and also a trumpet player. He does two of the chapters feature him as a trumpet soloist, a phenomenal musician. And then because of the Oksana Masters, this very distinguished Paralympian who got her start here in Louisville at the Boat Club, the museum in Colorado Springs is interested in showing this film as well. So it's slowly, organically, I'm trying to find ways to groups that are interested in putting this out, and it's happening. And while at the same time, I'm waiting for something to light a fire inside me that I know this is the next thing I want to devote a year to, or 3 or 4.
Fair enough. So you spend a year or two making the film, and then you have to spend a year or two putting the film out there, because this is not just, unless you're lucky enough to have a streaming platform or something pick it up, you gotta work through these festival circuits.
Well, I'll be looking at that too, but they're not mutually exclusive. I mean, I can, so, life goes on, you keep moving forward, and there's so many interesting people out there and stories to tell.
And Stu, you look like you had something to say. Did you?
No, I'm just clearing my throat. I apologize.
Oh, okay. No, just want to miss. Well, that about does it for our time today. This has been a fascinating conversation. So once again, Stu Pollard, Richard Van Cleek, and Mellissa, I gotta get your wait. I was gonna say Van Roo, right?
Gregory Roo.
Gregory Roo.
Yes.
You have a conversation with somebody for 45 minutes, and then all of a sudden you have to say their name, and you're like, it's Mellissa. So all three involved with the Flyover Film Festival, which is now in its 12th iteration, but that means what, Stu, 13 years because of the pandemic? Or
13 or 14, I think. We started in 2009. So yeah, tiny little asterisk on annual. Yeah. So we're taking a little bit of license there with it. But anyway.
Well, but
So.
it's presented by the Louisville Film Society and Speed Cinema, which, if you haven't been, is really such a fine place to watch cinema.
Yeah, I appreciate you mentioning that. Thanks to LVA and to you and to Christian for having us on, and especially thanks to Dean Otto and the Speed for hosting, being such a great partner to the festival. And it is so exciting for all these filmmakers to screen their work in such an amazing, beautiful environment. Especially you mentioned your score, Richard. Like the theater looks beautiful, but it sounds so amazing in there. So it's such a treat. We do these short film slams twice a year. Mellissa, you were actually y'all were both part of that recently with shorts that you've done. And the sound is just so spectacular. So Brian Denny, the projectionist, and Dean Otto, obviously the curator of film, who's a real amazing citizen of our arts community in Louisville. It's just such a treat. It's because these films just sounds and look so amazing in that environment. So if you're at all a fan of film in Louisville, it's not only do we have great programming, but it's just such a wonderful environment to experience cinema. So can't say enough things about that.
Well, so you can find the whole schedule at louisvillefilmsociety.org/flyover, and you can go to the Speed Cinema to find their schedule throughout the year. So if you love film, 2 important websites for you to follow. So thank you guys for being with me.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us. See you next weekend, or this weekend, I guess, when we're airing. Right?
This will air on the 28th. So yes, it's tonight. It opens tonight.
Yeah, tonight and this weekend. All right, thanks so much.
Thank you.